Nike's latest video. Should I react, guys? Should I actually fucking react? Is that what you guys want? Do you guys want fucking react content? Is that what you want? Okay. I'm doing fucking react content. Let's listen to the video, guys. Here we go. I think we can just listen to it.
Hey guys, Nike here. Today I wanted to make a video about a problem with the MMO genre and how it's evolving and where it's going in the future. Before I start, I'm not suggesting that the MMO genre is dead or even dying, but rather that it's changing in a way that raises questions about what the genre is and who and how it's meant to be interacted with. Primarily, I'm talking about the social aspect of the genre becoming less important over time. It's a very common trope you hear a lot these days to suggest that MMOs are becoming single-player games.
It's funny, we were kind of talking about this.
Where we're all playing alone together.
For instance, he uploaded today,
There's truth to that. I'm also aware of the other side of the argument that suggests encouraging solo play is a good thing and attracts more and different cohorts of players, and so on. I'm not looking to relitigate this issue or declare one side right or wrong. But it is an undeniable fact that MMOs have gotten less social all the time. If you go back to the pre-World of Warcraft MMOs of the late 90s and early 2000s, the games were essentially only playable in groups. The content and gameplay loops required groups to succeed.
Oh, you know, this is really funny. Do you know what's weird, guys? I can't believe it took me this long to realize this, but retail WoW is a weird fucking game because it is not actually that solo friendly. I don't know why I didn't have that thought until recently, but yeah, it is weird because the game is like unplayable unless you want to actually interact with other people, which is strange. Actually, like, if you're unwilling to apply to a group in a raid, you won't even get past LFR, right? Because you have to apply to join a normal group, right? To go and interact with a group. And Mythic, you need to, you know, join a guild to do Mythic realistically. Well, if you want to clear Mythic, you can do a little bit of Mythic without that, but you know what I mean. It's actually very interesting. Just raids, or M+. You have to apply to join groups in M+. Like, you can't get... It's actually really... But before Delves existed, you couldn't get good gear without playing in a group, right? Like, you can't complete the game without playing in a group. Even now you can't. Like, getting full myth gear without raiding Mythic, that is actually very slow, right? Like, really, really slow to do that. And retail WoW is weird in this regard, actually. It's one of the most group-oriented MMOs that exists, I think. Most other MMOs are way more solo-oriented, actually. Play Heroic and M+ is miserable. I mean, I haven't actually had that much of a bad experience. Like, I've done a couple of, like... I've pugged... back in Season 2 of Dragonflight, my first season playing the game, I did a weekly Rashok pug because I wanted the Rashok weapon on my druid, and it took a long time to eventually get it, but I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't actually that bad. It was... You know, sometimes it was a bit scuffed, but it is what it is. But you know, these things definitely happen. But yeah, this is very true. Like, most MMOs are very solo oriented. Like, Retail WoW is trying to go in that direction a little bit more, I think, because of you know, they're doing delves and stuff. But yeah, it's actually very interesting. Like, Retail WoW is one of the least solo oriented MMOs out there. And here's a really fun thing, by the way, guys. Classic WoW is very solo-oriented. That's another thing as well that's also worth noting. Wooden Potatoes actually commented on this on his video when he was, I believe he did a comparison between Guild Wars 1 and World of Warcraft, and he actually remarked that Guild Wars 1 was very, very group-oriented, and World of Warcraft was very, very solo-oriented. And that was actually a big advantage in favor of World of Warcraft, actually. Classic specific, well, vanilla, not even classic, right? Like, and I think that's actually a really interesting distinction to draw there.
Succeed at all levels from the very beginning.
Yeah.
This strongly encouraged players who wanted to progress to join a guild or a clan or whatever it was called in that particular game.
Yeah.
And achieve their goals from a shared...
You know, this is actually a really interesting thing. There's also... This is something that's co-evolved too. World of Warcraft, when it released, and I think this is true of, no, this actually is true of all classic MMOs. I'm not even going to say WoW here. Classic MMOs, the end game was not the game. Right? Right? The leveling was the game. You know what I mean? And that's how most people see it. That's one of the reasons why hardcore does so well in a lot of these games, like, you know, hardcore seasonal servers, right? The end game is not actually that relevant. What's important is getting there, right? Is making it to max level, right? And then, you know, many people then go on to, you know, get best in slot gear. But certainly when these games existed early on, nobody was raiding Molten Core, dude. Like, nobody was raiding Nax, right, in 2005, right? Like, that was a tiny proportion of the population. Like, I don't think I even got 60. Like, when I was, when I played, yeah, this is, guys, dude, how cute is this? My gameplay in Vanilla WoW was, I was farming Kodos and skinning them. Well, I guess that's a bit fucked up. On my Tauren Hunter. And I farmed turtles in the hinterlands because I liked golden pearls. Like, that was my gameplay. And there was a dwarf... Dude, this is the legend, bro. Like, back in the day, there was this dwarf hunter. I believe he was called Hacky, okay? And he would always try and PvP me. And I'd fuck him up on my Frost Mage, bro. I was there, 9 years old, frostbolting this guy, polymorph his pet, and annihilate him. Send that guy to the fucking graveyard. But... he did kill me sometimes, because sometimes he caught me off guard when I was fighting a turtle, and then he got me. But I saw... it's actually crazy. I remember his name, though. Yeah, he's a dwarf hunter called Hacky, and he had a pet boar. Okay, how original, buddy. Unbelievable. But anyway, yeah, it's like, this is another big thing about classic MMOs that I think maybe isn't explicitly stated as often as it should be. Like, Endgame was not a concept that people engage with back then. And it also wasn't intended by the devs to be, like, the main focus of the game. I think a lot of these, you can see how long the leveling process is, and that kind of reflects this. Like, the Endgame was designed to, realistically, just be something for, like, mega vets to play, right? Like stuff like Molten Core and Nax Ramus, and in Guild Wars 1, I'd say the same, right? Like stuff like going to the underworld, right? That was not content that a lot of people actually ended up doing. There's a reason why they streamlined it down so much, actually, in Eye of the North and made dungeons a lot more accessible, and I think they probably got way more participation, right? In dungeons because of that, because they're just a lot more accessible and kind of easier to get into, I'd say, than compared to something like Underworld that's kind of got some like pretty weird shit going on there. If I'm being honest, guys. Same thing with like the Deep as well in factions, right? It's kind of crazy shit. But yeah, Endgame is kind of a new concept in MMOs, really. Like, classic... and this is... I think this is one of the reasons why people like classic MMOs so much, is because they are actually less endgame focused, right? Endgame is, in some ways, optional, right? Like, it's a lot more optional. And... like, you can have, like, a very full experience in some of these games, like old school RuneScape, Guild Wars 1, classic WoW. You can have a very rich, full experience without ever touching a raid, right? Without ever touching any of that stuff, really, right? You can just, like, play the game. You don't even have to worry about, like, getting best in slot or anything like that. You can still have a very full experience without any of that. So that's, like, I think another really interesting distinction that you see in more modern gaming. And, by the way, I have to say this. I want to move on because I want to keep listening to the video, and I've completely derailed here. But I do have to quickly say some of that is social because more information so people know this stuff, so you might as well go for it, right? Like, it becomes then, you know, people are goal-oriented and efficiency-oriented. And you can see that reflected in the fact that, yeah, guess what? People min-max the hell out of these games now. Because, again, player mentality and player behavior has obviously changed over time with the availability of, like, social media, information, like, more video content, right? Like guides and all that kind of stuff that we talked about before. So it's not like just the fact that the games are designed differently. It also is that player behavior has changed. But those two things have kind of co-evolved there as well. But anyway, moving on.
Common interest. This acted as a filter. People who, for whatever reason, would not or could not be somewhat social found their progress blocked, and they left the game and the genre. as time.
Ooh, that's interesting. I guess so. I guess a lot of people go like, yeah, you know, I guess that probably did happen a lot. People would kind of, I think a lot of people wouldn't even make it to max level though, right? I feel like people maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but my interpretation of what would happen in like older games is that people wouldn't even be entirely aware that their progress was blocked to an extent. You just kind of go like, oh yeah, I kind of got to max level. That's pretty cool, right? Like, what now? And I think a lot of people weren't even aware of that stuff. Like, okay, so here's another classic story. I don't know how this happened, guys, but, oh, I do know how this happened. So I joined a raid in Vanilla WoW when I was 9. I didn't know what a raid was. I was just playing on my Frost Mage because based. And I think I wanted to join a lower Blackrock Spire group, but I think I accidentally joined or like asked for an invite into a Blackwing Lair group instead. And I ended up in Blackwing Lair. I had no idea what the fuck was going on. Okay, just like frostbolting away like a lunatic, right? And we nearly, I think we actually, yeah, I don't remember this. We didn't kill Chromagus. We got Hardstuck, guys, on Chromagus, but we killed everything else except for that, actually. But I think a lot of us didn't even have the awareness this stuff even existed, right? I did not really know what was going on or like what I had joined, to be honest, like what the situation was, and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And I think that, you know, people did kind of finish the game. Like, oh yeah, I finished the game. I got max level, right? For sure. But, and I think that definitely some people would go like, oh yeah, if I want to go any further, then I'm going to have to like join a guild and do all that stuff. That's not for me. But I think that's kind of interesting to kind of get that perspective as well. Because I do think that it's not entirely that people just felt blocked. I think it's also that people didn't even know this stuff was even there, right? Because the game did not really telegraph that to you whatsoever, right? It was just kind of like, oh yeah, this is kind of a thing if you find it and you know the right people, but otherwise this wasn't even a concept for most people. Like even getting to max level was relatively uncommon, right? I would say in some of these games.
Time passed, the games evolved more content that was added to cater to players who were both uninterested in group play and also had limited time, as forming groups for content does eat a lot of potential play time for time-crunched players.
It's true.
Today, an MMO that doesn't allow full or nearly full progression to essentially solo players would be financially unthinkable.
You know what's funny? Dude, you know what's funny about this? This is why people get mad about progression in retail WoW. Because retail WoW doesn't let you do this. If you want BIS, you need to clear Mythic. You literally cannot get BIS unless you clear Mythic raids in World of Warcraft. That is mind-blowing, actually, if you think about it in the context of modern MMOs, right? The game says, nope, get good. Okay, you need to get better, right? Or you're not getting that trinket, you're not getting that item, right? But yeah, like Nike is right here. I think this is it's the exception that proves the rule. Retail WoW is very strange, I think, in this regard, actually, in how it actually handles loot. It's why there's so much kind of anger and frustration around, like, oh, it takes too long to gear this way, buff the loot here, like, buff Mythic Plus, buff raiding, like, make the eye level stat difference, change crafted gear, right? Like, make crafted gear better, make crafted gear worse. There's so much friction between player groups here, because the game does block you. It will say, if you want to get better items, you must get better. You must join a guild, and you must complete that boss. Pretty interesting.
MMOs survive regardless of their monetization strategy by having a critical mass of players, which means that they cannot survive without, you know, the denigrated groups of casuals or asocial players or time-crunched gamers or any other niche of player who isn't interested.
There's a reason why WoW is added delves, because they want those players. They want those players to be happy, right? And those players have felt kind of slighted by the game by denying them, like, BIS gear, like Myth gear, Hero gear, for a long time. So yeah, this is why they've added delves. They're making WoW more solo friendly so that those players are able to progress their characters without necessarily engaging in group content. Yes, absolutely. Like, it's like, Nike, I think, is actually very right here. You might be saying, well, hang on a minute. If Retail WoW is the most popular MMO, how is it getting away with this? That's why it's getting away with it. It's because it's the big dog. I think that the statement that you have to make your MMO soloable, like, that holds for every MMO except maybe Retail WoW. And even that game is changing, right? Like, even with its behemoth scale, right? Like, even Retail WoW definitely wants to kind of tap into that audience as well and kind of have that experience for players who want it.
For better or worse, this is a hard financial reality, and any new MMO that doesn't throw a bone to these players is likely dead on arrival, no matter how good the game is in other regards.
Yeah.
But even among players who desire group play and are open to being social, the games are declining in that aspect. Part of it is that group play content is more marginalized than it was before in order to bring solo play to more prominence. But there's other contributing factors as well. And the first that I would like to highlight is an issue that I have with most new games, and it's that they launch in a solved state.
Oh, he's so right about this. Yeah, me and Nike have talked... Oh, I need to change my build, by the way. Me and Nike have talked about this before. This is so true. Dude, I hate open alphas and betas. Dude, oh my god. This is actually one of the worst things about... Not just... This is not even modern game dev, modern MMOs. This is modern... game dev in general. Open alphas and open betas are cursed because it means that all information about the game is already known. Like, I kind of regret playing New World alphas and betas, and a big part of that is because I knew what the best weapons were, I knew what the best gear was, I knew where the best zones were, where the farms were, how to do the quests, how all the systems worked, how all the items worked, how all the stats worked, right? I knew all of that on the launch of the game, and everyone knew that. There was no mystery, there was no discovery, there was no reason to you know, talk with people in my Twitch chat because we already knew all of that information. The game was solved immediately. Oh, this is like a really big thing, 100%, yeah. And it is true of games that have a PTR as well. This is true, actually. It's why I loved... Oh, this was so cool. Oh my god. So, context. There's like a kind of like old school RuneScape, but vanilla WoW called Season of Discovery. And one of the big things that I really liked about it, they added like new content, kind of similar to old school, right? Like they're adding like new raids and stuff like that, you know, weren't in the original game, right? They're not just re-releasing old stuff. But what I really loved is they didn't have a PTR. So it was an actual mystery. And they had some really well-hidden stuff, like you could get like special abilities by hunting down little mini quests in the open world, and nobody knew how they worked. Right? Nobody knew how it worked. And there was like these big community hunts to find down these runes that would give you special abilities, right? At the start of every new patch in the expansion, and figuring out the new raid bosses, right? And like getting all the new items, right? And where they come from. Yeah, and all of that stuff. Some of it did get data mined, to be fair. I've got a full disclosure that we can't pretend it was all sunshine and rainbows. But, yeah. Really, it was actually really cool. One of my favorite things about that experience was there was no early access. We had to actually figure it out. It was genuinely fresh. And that's a very uncommon experience these days in new MMOs, 100%, yeah. It's a big thing. It's why I really struggle to get hyped about these kind of early access ass MMOs, you know, because the game just can't possibly change enough to invalidate that information. So, like, a big part of the fun of the game will have already been past tense before the launch, which actually sucks.
Open alphas, early access,
true,
public betas up until launch day, etc. Yeah. By day one of the official launch,
yep,
the best leveling plans are known.
Yep.
The best builds are already discovered.
Yep.
And the best farming spots are already solved. Part of the appeal of the MMO genre, especially...
And I actually... Okay, I want to quickly address something that people are going to say. People are going to say, oh, but just don't look at that information. Just don't look at it. Well, the thing is, I'm actually going to say this. That is unironically impossible. Because if you wanted to do that, you would have to literally not interact with any other human being, because all the people around you in the world are going to be doing stuff that they already know, right? All the people who are talking about the game on every single social media, they're going to be doing that. Every single Twitch stream, every single YouTube video, that information is out there, and you will come into contact with it unless you unironically, like, ignore every other player in the entire game, right? Like, that is not a realistic option. You can't just pretend that people don't know this. You're going to see people doing things and go, oh, okay, I wonder what they know that I don't, right? You know, there is no escape from this, right? There is no escape. Because of how social media works and how information operates on the internet, and just the nature, you're playing in a world surrounded by people who are going to be doing things. They will do things that you will then watch, right? Like, there's no escape from this. I'm not even gonna. No, I actually am not a big fan of saying that. Oh, but if you don't do it, you'll be at a disadvantage. I actually think that's a weak argument, right? Like, what do you care about? Do you care about efficiency or discovery, right? I think it's kind of a pick one. I think that argument is actually relatively weak. I think it's a much more stronger position to say, like, you literally cannot do what you're saying. Like, because the implication is that if you just don't look at the information, I don't think that's possible, right? You can't do that, right? Realistically. Because of just the way that these games work, it's not a realistic option that works.
In a brand new game is the exploration of a huge new world with secrets to find and systems to master.
That is a good call. In single-player games, you can do this. Like, just, for example, I did not look at guides when I played through Divinity. I played through Divinity Original Sin with some of my friends. We didn't look at guides, right? And we were able to have that experience for ourselves. We had to be careful because it was streamed. Plenix was streaming, so we had to be careful. We had to very explicitly say, do not spoil us in Twitch chat, right? Do not tell us how to solve the puzzle in Twitch chat, right? Okay? But with multiplayer games, nah, it's just not realistic to do this. Like, you can't do it.
Most people watching this video can think back to a time when they were playing a new MMO with their friends and sitting on voice chat together, and someone gets a nice loot drop or discovers some hidden secret area or finds a new boss, and everyone on voice chat gets excited.
Exactly.
When was the last time you logged into your favorite MMO outside of a guild raid or event, hopped on the voice server with the other players who just happened to be online, and played the game while casually chatting with people who were just randomly on the voice server? This is a rarity now, but ironically, it is quite common in the ARPG genre today, despite those being largely solo games. How is it that single-player games like Diablo or Path of Exile manage to out-social MMOs in that regard?
This is actually a good point, by the way. Like, and this guy, dude, it's weird. Whoa, guys, I pre-watched this video. You know how I was talking about how solo game modes like hardcore or Iron Man challenges, right, in MMOs are more social than MMOs right now? Yeah, it's because it generates that shared experience. Dude, I feel like Nike's going to say this right now. I actually pre-watched this.
I would say that experiencing the MMO discovery phase with friends in real time is some of the best experiences you can ever have in an MMO. Just having friends on voice chat with you that you can bounce ideas off of, celebrate wins, mourn defeats and bad luck, ask questions back and forth with, and even just small talk reinforces the social aspect of the game.
Ooh.
If you have this social framework, you will play the game longer and stick with it longer than a player who does not have this framework in their experience. If a game launches in a totally solved state, there isn't as much discovery and there isn't as much benefit or excitement to be had while playing with friends in real time. Unfortunately, this problem is also the result of a financial reality.
Yep.
MMO development is expensive, and they need the money of paid alphas and betas to finance development. So in a sense, they are trading the excitement of launch for the money during alpha. The second aspect is that MMO...
This is kind of a thing, yeah. Like, this model... game dev is very expensive, and the scope and scale of games has kind of escalated over time, whereas, like, prices, like, box prices haven't really increased that much compared to, like, the escalating cost of stuff, so this is true. Like, funding a game, and considering how big people expect games to be these days, especially these MMOs, like, if you're going to make an MMO, like, this sucks if you're an MMO dev, but you are essentially competing against Blizzard and Square and ArenaNet, right? And Jagex, if you're making a new MMO. So, yeah, you've got some pretty heavy hitters there that you've got to compete against, so good luck with that. So, yeah, it's actually very difficult to do that, and you need a hell of a lot of cash to make that happen.
In-game economics and loot systems have had the excitement drained out of them over the decades. There's very little random loot in MMOs anymore. Pre-vanilla WoW, loot was much more random, and you could either grind or farm specific bosses or events for drops. With World of Warcraft, loot and gear progression was much more on rails, and subsequent games and updates have furthered this trend. There are legitimate balance reasons this is so. A low-level character killing a trash monster in the very first zone of the game and having it drop the best item on the server is a big problem for an MMO where players demand game balance.
But yeah, what he said there is the absolute big thing. Like, games these days are expected to have balance and competitive integrity, right? And you cannot have random progression or overly random progression in a game that is expected to have balance within it. This is actually a very subtle point, but it's very, very true, actually. Like, if you are expected to get that gear, it needs to be realistic to obtain for everyone. Which, by the way, actually makes it kind of soul-crushing and also simultaneously boring at the same time. This is a very big problem with modern reward structures and modern loot systems, is that loot ends up being routine and not exciting because you're expected to get the item. It's not, am I going to get the item? It's when am I going to get the item? And if is way more exciting than when. When is boring. It's like, oh god, I've got to do this dungeon another like 17 times. We got to get to the end, right? We got to get that done, right? Whereas if you're playing like a game where ultimately balance is not a big thing within the game, right? Like, particularly because the games are easier. Like, a game like Vanilla WoW that was referenced here, it's a very easy game, right? It's not challenging at all. Realistically, is it the end of the world if you don't get, like, the sickest best in slot? Not really. You'll still be able to, like, obliterate the content very, very easily. But that's obviously an entirely different thing. You've got, like, tightly tuned encounters in modern MMOs that have DPS checks, healing checks, tank checks, all that kind of stuff, right? All of a sudden, it becomes way more important that you're able to deterministically gear your character and make progress. So yeah, competition and balance have actually had like some pretty negative consequences, right? Actually, for MMOs, right? Like in terms of like the way that loot and rewards work, for sure.
There is a trade-off to be made for game balance, and that's excitement.
True.
Loot in modern MMOs is boring.
True.
The reward structure in virtually every MMO encourages people to raid log. On the micro level, this means log in, clear the raid, log out until raid reset, and you can get your rewards again, or roll for your rewards again. On the macro level, it's log in when a new content patch drops, farm at every reward reset until you have all the juice squeezed, and then log out until the next balance patch, or the next content patch. Beyond game balance, there are economic reasons games do this as well. Rather than try to fight this trend...
I think the reason why people raid log is actually... I'm not sure it's necessarily to do with the reward structure. I think it's actually more like a side effect of the game becoming less social. Because I feel like, you know, rewards have always been time-gated to an extent, right? Like, you know, you've got your raid lockout. That's like a tale as old as time, right? I feel like a lot of raid logging happens because you end up in this situation where it's like, well, what am I doing in the game, right? Like, what is my purpose to be logged in, right? And for a lot of people, that's like doing some kind of progression element, like, you know, farming or something like that. But what if you don't have anything to farm, right? Like, you know, what if you got the items, right? Like, you get to this point where, like, your only reason to log in is to basically raid log and, like, wait for your extra item is the kind of thing. I think is kind of what happens, but yeah.
Studios have totally capitulated and embraced a seasonal come-and-go model. They don't expect you to play the game every day for hours anymore. And they're not developing content.
And this is because they aren't social, by the way. Like, if you want someone to play the game every day, you need to give them a social experience. You can't make an... It's literally impossible to create enough content that you can keep someone in a game every single day. The only way you can do that is with a social experience. By the way, Guild Wars 2 did this really well with World versus World. Like, the time where I've wanted to log in and play Guild Wars 2 every single day was Heart of Thorns, World versus World. That's like, yeah, I want to log on with the crew. I tell the story all the time. I remember Arcane, my right-hand man, he would sprint home from work. Seriously, he would sprint home from work to make it in time for reset. We played I can't believe we did this. We played World vs. World reset for 12 hours every Friday, and he was covered in grease and sweat from sprinting home from work to make it in time for reset. And we just log on and we fucking slam. Okay. We had like the trance music cranking in the background, slamming World vs. World with a 50-man blob. Okay. That is how you get people to log into your game every day. It's not a staff of +7 intellect, right? That's not going to cut it. It's not even content. Content won't do that. You can't make enough of that. You just cannot make enough of that. It needs to be people. It needs to be a social interaction, for sure.
To facilitate that. Nor does the loot systems, as I said, encourage you to do that.
And yeah, every MMO is seasonal now. Right? I think one slight divergence here is that I almost feel like loot systems never did this, right? I felt like, because when I was playing vanilla WoW, I was like, bro, you know, I had to like farm for consumables, I guess, and stuff like that. But like, I had like Biss on my warrior. I was like, you know, what am I guess a level an ult, right? Do some PvP, do some like world PvP and stuff like that, and like hang out with the boys, right? Like that was kind of like the experience. And maybe we're kind of talking about, yeah, I think Nike's talking about like older games actually. Than that, I think he mentioned that in the video actually, specifically older than vanilla WoW, but I didn't really play any of those. I've got no idea.
They expect and they want you to follow the seasonal model. The biggest studios like Blizzard try to have multiple games on offer,
especially
with
Blizzard,
each time to fill in each other's gaps.
Yep.
So you never have to wander out of their ecosystems.
They have literally perfected this, right? Like if you want to play one game, you can play WoW, because you can play Plunderstorm, you can play Retail WoW, you can play Classic WoW, you can play Classic Hardcore, you can play Season of Discovery, you can play Cataclysm Classic. Like, holy shit, okay? You can play Remix, right? Like, you have infinite versions of the game for you to play. Like, you know, there aren't enough hours in the day to play every version of WoW at this point. Like, they were pretty smart on this, I'm not gonna lie, right? Like, you know, I know Blizzard, you know, I know Blizzard kind of, you know, get a bit of a rap for, you know, not being the biggest innovators in the universe anymore. But I'm not gonna lie, they're absolutely leading the pack on this when it comes to like the seasonal approach. Guild Wars 2 is now very much in line with this, right? Like, you know, WoW was doing seasonal for quite a long time, actually, like a couple of expansions back. They were going on the seasonal direction. And Guild Wars 2, and I think basically every other MMO is like very much in on that. I do think that this approach was kind of inspired by ARPGs, looking at Diablo and PoE. I think that's where this is kind of like evolved from. But yeah, every MMO is seasonal now. They expect you to log in, log out, and then come back when there's more to do, for sure.
But smaller studios like Square Enix, ArenaNet, or Bethesda have decided that you are better off setting players free and counting on them to come back when there is new content.
Pretty much, yeah.
Ironically, ARPGs like Path of Exile or Diablo, which also follow seasonal models, are more strongly social while the players are logged in, as I talked about before. Because of the expansive and systems-heavy nature of these games, combined with the exciting loot and near-infinite progression, being on voice chat with friends while playing, even if you're not playing together in-game, has a ton of value, much like it did in the past days of the ARPG genre. I'm sorry, the MMO genre. This is also evident in content creation. ARPGs tend to have a much larger Twitch presence than MMOs relative to the size of their player base.
I really feel like something about this is that And this is something that I've really felt, actually, when I've started playing WoW more, is that when you're on voice with playing WoW, you kind of have to talk about the game. The game is like a coordination simulator. Like, it's surprisingly difficult to just play WoW and hang out with the boys. The game is almost too hard for that in a lot of areas of the content. To be fair, it kind of is what you're doing, right? Like, if you're doing like a heroic clear, then yeah, it's free, right? Or if you're doing like weekly keys, that's not really that hard. But like, man, like, it's very hard to have a truly social experience, while also doing like high keys or mythic raiding, right? That's kind of hard, but that's my bad, okay? Because that's that's like the type of content that I enjoy, right? So like, I've kind of dug my own grave there on that one, I suppose.
If people playing an ARPG aren't on voice with their friends, they are likely playing while watching a Twitch stream on the other monitor that acts as their pseudo-social structure.
Yeah.
Additionally, the MMO genre adopting ARPG seasonal model reflects a growing trend of ARPGization of MMOs.
True.
In a sense, the newest MMO are much closer to a Diablo game than they are to classic WoW or EverQuest. The two genres are homogenizing in a very real way, with some ARPGs moving to add dedicated group content as well as open world content with multiplayers online in the single map or shard or instance or whatever. And MMOs are adding more single player procedurally generated endgame content. The final barrier separating these genres is a very thin wall indeed, and that wall is that ARPGs have economic and character resets each season, while MMOs are effectively permanent character progression. My prediction is that in 10 to 20 years, the reset versus permanent distinction will be the only distinction remaining between these two genres. Random loot with economic resets versus loot on rails and permanent progression is the downstream of that. And it will mark, like I said, the only difference between these two genres.
I think the economic reset thing is really important because you have to, if you want to do a seasonal thing, you have to have some type of reset, right? And that's exactly that's kind of something that you can do with expansions, right? Like, expansions in some ways are economic resets. Guild Wars 2 actually struggles with this. There's a reason why Guild Wars 2 struggles to make expansions rewarding. It's because you use the same materials, right? Like, it's not like, oh, it's why for me, every patch in Guild Wars 2 doesn't feel rewarding because I've already got thousands of Mystic Clovers, thousands of gold, thousands of Ectos, tier 6 materials, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's nothing for me to actually go after. I've already got all of it, right? So yeah, economic reset is actually pretty important, I think. Like introducing like new things for the player to go after, right? And to essentially like have to grind and farm and so on. I think it's actually very, very important, for sure. Oh, no, it's not even a pseudo reset, Nike. It is a full reset. You do the... In retail WoW, you do the full progression cycle every season. Like, every season, you do the open world farming, you farm the rares, you farm the rep, you farm delves, then you do normals and heroics, then you're going to do mythic zeros, then you're going to do mythic plus, then you're going to do normal, heroic, and then mythic. You will do the exact same cycle every single season.
I fully expect, from a gameplay and content perspective, they will be virtually identical in almost every way. What does that mean? The financial reality is that a modern MMO is just more expensive to develop and maintain than an ARPG. It will become increasingly hard for studios to justify the development of a more traditional MMO when the players increasingly demand ARPG-like gameplay. As I said at the start, MMOs are not dying, but they are evolving and perhaps evolving into something very different in appearance from their origins. There is a lot more that could be said on this topic, especially how PvP and MMOs, which used to be important, has become largely irrelevant due to the existence of MOBAs. PvP for MMO developers was a godsend. It was a...
Well, the way they do the reset now is that they have, like, every expansion... the currency becomes legacy, right? So basically, you only get ancient coins. Oh wait, these don't. Wait, do these go away? How does this work actually? Oh no. Yeah, these don't go away, but they kind of have a reset, right? Like all of this stuff is going to give you ancient coins when the next expansion comes out, right? It's like the new thing is going to be there. So they have kind of like a framework for that. But yeah, adding more stuff is weird though. Like adding infinite currencies is scuffed as hell, right? That's the problem. Because it ends up incredibly bloated, right? You have to kind of like get rid of shit. It gets a little bit out of control.
Cheap to develop Endgame that gave players endless replayability, and a large percentage of the game population participated in PvP. Now, PvP is played in most MMOs by a tiny minority, and the studios cannot lean on cheap PvP and are forced to spend huge amounts of cash developing a PvE-centric endgame. But that's perhaps an idea for another video to go further on. Suffice it to say, the social aspect of MMOs loses all value and importance, and if that's the case, what's the point of the genre existing?
Oh, shit.
Anyway, guys, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Please leave any comments you had below. I would like to hear what you have to say.
Reform is joining.
And I'll see you next time.
Yeah, I mean, no, I definitely agree with that. It's a fat video, to be honest. It's a fat video. It is a problem. It is a really, really big problem. But I do think that there are solutions out there. I think you really have to lean on the... You have to lean on stuff like hardcore and challenge runs, like social experiences like that, in my opinion, is how you want to do it. Improving social features in the game, I think, is pretty important as well. But yeah, and certainly try to conceal information, like try to hide information as much as possible, like from your player base, like avoid stuff like PTRs, avoid stuff like data mining. Well, it's hard to do, to be fair, but, you know, do your best. Avoid stuff like alphas and betas, you know, so that information like is actually kind of locked down so people have to discover it. So there's like a couple of things that I think can be done, and I think studios are actually kind of wising up to it. Like we see, well, the ones that are crowdfunded, not so much, but I think in general, like a lot of studios are realizing that this stuff is important. I think kind of anyway. Yeah, especially with the seasonal stuff. I think the seasonal stuff is probably going to help out a little bit as well. What else do I have to say about this? What else do I have to say about this video? I think that's all I've got, really. I think I have spoken my words regarding that video.